Please don't fall. Okay, I fixed it. I'm gonna be talking about autism within the Latino community. The reason why I want to talk about this is scoured YouTube, I scoured Google to find like some Latinos who have autism and have experience. Like, I feel like a lot of the representation for autism online is predominantly white people, and I feel like white autism is very different from ethnic autism because just there's so many cultural differences between, you know, like Americans or white people and Hispanic people or Latino people. So I wanted to talk about that and bring more awareness because a lot of Latinos and a lot of women are undiagnosed and don't even know they have autism because they have this image of what autism looks like when it's not correct at all. So first I'm going to start with what autism is, okay? So a lot of people's predisposed knowledge on what autism is it's that white kid that you had in elementary school that would throw a lot of tantrums and bang his head a lot and scream and cause like nuisances. But a lot of people with autism don't act like that, especially women. Autism in women is very different from autism in men, and for a long time people just thought that men and white children are the only like social group that are able to get autism, and it's not true. And unfortunately a lot of Latinos are undiagnosed with autism because a lot of parents do not even know or have a good representation of what autism is. So I'm gonna bring that up right now. Autism is a spectrum disorder, so it's not like a linear spectrum. I don't know if you've ever been in science class where they show you the electromagnetic spectrum or something about the light wavelength spectrum. It does not look anything like that. It is not a linear spectrum. It's actually more circular. I don't know if you've ever used MS Paint or Microsoft Paint, but you know that little tool that you choose to select all of the colors and all of the colors show up and it's like a whole gradient of different colors? That's what the autism spectrum actually is. And just think about it as a main category for a lot of different deficits that people have, and if these people have all of these deficits, it kind of means that you may be on the spectrum. So a lot of the deficits are social deficits, there's sensory issues, and their processing issues. So our brains are literally wired differently than the allistic meaning non-autistic brain. So a lot of us have different ways of talking with people that a lot of people don't like. We have a lot of sensory issues. So you may notice if you're in a public space for too long, or if you're around too much noise for too long, you start to get a headache. That could be overstimulation from your senses being overstimulated is too much for a long time. So now I'm gonna go into the misinformation and the uneducation of autism within Latino communities, okay? A lot of autistic traits are overlooked. I have a little journal because I veer off of my point a lot due to my autism. So a lot of autistic traits are overlooked because a lot of Latino parents are not informed or educated on what autism is or how it can look like in their kids. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit as well. And a lot of portrayals of autism, if Latino parents are aware of what it is, a lot of portrayals of autism are very over exaggerated. So you'll see a lot of movies where the main character who may be autistic might do a lot of this, like banging themselves, screaming, maybe pulling their hair, or like whenever they have like a tantrum or something, or a meltdown, I should say, not a tantrum, because they're two different things. Portrayals of autism are over exaggerated, like I said. And I want to use the example of the show Love on the Spectrum. Okay, there's this YouTuber that I watched that actually helped me a lot throughout my journey, because she was the only person of color that I've like found, or like, you know, I tried to find Latino people, but I found a Asian woman. Her name is Irene. I'm not entirely sure if she was born in this country or not, but I'm gonna assume that because she's from a different culture that isn't the American culture, she also has a lot of similar struggles that I had. So I relate to her a lot, and I will try to link her. I will link her down below in the description, because she has a lot of really great videos, and I actually love watching them. But yes, the show Love on the Spectrum features like people with autism kind of finding love, but a lot of the producers that pick people represented on that show are like really exaggerated cases of autism. A lot of autistic people do not have such exaggerated traits like the ones that are displayed on Love on the Spectrum, especially autistic people in Latin and ethnic cultures that were kind of forced to mask their autistic traits a lot more. So you're not going to see a lot of us banging our heads. You're not going to see a lot of us doing that stuff. I'm not saying all, but I'm saying most. And people just generally aren't aware of what autism truly is. You know, the representation of autism that they have in their head is extremely wrong, and a lot of people, unfortunately, are ashamed of what autism is. Like, if their kid gets an autism diagnosis, a lot of parents genuinely get ashamed of their children and start being very ableist, when in reality they may be autistic themselves, because autistic is a genetically, well, it has a lot of genetic components. Okay, I'm gonna move on to how I kind of didn't realize I was autistic for a really long time, and the reasoning behind this, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate, is because, first of all, I feel like because we are such a collective culture, a lot of us don't really get a lot of time to reflect on ourselves, because a lot of us live with our families still, especially at our age. A lot of us, you know, we have jobs where we kind of have to interact with people. We don't really get a lot of time to ourselves to reflect on ourselves. And I think I was blessed. I'm really privileged, and I'm really blessed to have been able to drop out of college. Well, not drop out, but like take a break from college. And I didn't work for a while. I literally just chilled. And you know, that's really frowned upon by a lot of people in the Latino community, especially the elder people. But I am so glad I did that. I really needed it, and I don't think I would be where I am in my life if I didn't do that. So I'm really thankful that I was able to have the bravery and the strength to not listen to all of these people telling me that I shouldn't have done this. I don't regret it at all. I'm actually extremely happy. I've never been this happy in my life, seriously. And I'm gonna attribute it to being able to have this big break and being able to self-reflect, because my entire life I've been in school. The only small little breaks that I got from, you know, living was summer breaks, and I really loved them. I grew up in a really toxic household, and I'm sure a lot of you guys did as well. My parents had a really toxic dynamic between each other, and unfortunately they didn't hide a lot of their issues from us. I'm sure they tried, but you know, we're not dumb. We can see what's going on. And unfortunately my parents were abusive. A lot of abuse in Latino communities is normalized. A lot of people think that it's okay to hit their kids to make them behave, but in reality they only really create a fear reaction, and parenting through fear is actually really hostile and just hurtful towards children. It creates a lot of wounds, and I can definitely agree and feel that. So I experienced a lot of abuse from both of my parents: verbal abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but my parents abused me, and a lot of the abuse that they did, they didn't even realize they were doing it, because they themselves have these patterns from the past that they have with their own parents. Mothering. So I wrote mothering. I think I meant parentification. Parentification is basically switching roles with your parent. So instead of your parent consoling you and basically taking care of you and your emotional needs, you end up taking care of your parents' emotional needs a lot, which is something that I felt like I did. My mom kind of denied that when I brought it up to her, but I really felt like I had to mother my mom. A lot of the times, instead of my mom kind of comforting me and being aware of my emotions and how I'm feeling, it was always me being aware of her emotions and how she's feeling. So for example, I saw my mom treated very poorly by my dad. I've seen bruises that my dad has left on her, and for you to see that on someone that's, you know, your parent, that's someone that, but from someone that's supposed to care for you, it's really like, it hurts. It's really disheartening, and it's really traumatic for you as a kid to have to see that. And because I saw that, I felt really responsible for my mom's happiness and my mom's well-being, unfortunately. And there were a lot of times where my mom has told me, where she told me some just sad thing. Like, my mom is very religious, and a lot of Latinos are very religious, so you're never gonna catch, or hardly ever gonna catch, a Latino parent, especially past the age of 40, ever say that they're suicidal or that they want to commit suicide. But there was a moment where I heard my mom kind of say something along those lines, and I remember the exact moment I was when she told me. I remember, like, we were at a light. It was really close to my house. It's a street that we always go to, and we were stopped at this light, and she, like, literally said, like, this is getting really hard, and I'm struggling so much, and I'm really depressed, and I just can't anymore. Like, you know, girl, get a therapist. I am not your therapist. You can't be telling me these things. Unfortunately, she didn't know that, and it's okay, but get a therapist. I'm gonna joke around a lot. I'm sorry. That's how I cope. Enabling. I feel like my mom is a huge enabler to both. I mean, I think she enables all of us. I definitely have some narcissistic tendencies. I grew up with a narcissistic dad, so I probably do. I can't act like, you know, the way that he was didn't affect me, but I can definitely see a lot of narcissistic tendencies in my brother. And unfortunately, my brother and my you know, my dad, they were just, they gave me a really hard time. My brother still gives me a really hard time because he's like a really big bully, and he always invalidates my feelings, and it's just like, you're not healthy for me, you know? But I feel like my mom enables my brother and my father a lot because, first off, unfortunately, she does not really stand up for herself, and I don't really know if it's because she doesn't recognize, because I also suspect, well, my mom knows, and my mom agrees that she's autistic, because I showed her a lot of evidence on why I believe I'm autistic. My brother's diagnosed with ADHD, and neurodivergency runs in families, so I know for a fact my mom probably has autism as well. But I think because of her autism and some of her traits, she kind of maybe didn't understand when my brother and my father were like being really rude to her, and she kind of just let it slide. When I'm looking at it from my perspective, and I'm like, why are you letting my brother talk to you like this? Why are you letting my dad talk to you like this? Like, why do you put up with this? And, you know, being in an outside perspective, seeing it, it's really easy to judge, but people like that are very manipulative, unfortunately, and it's not my mom's fault that she put up with a lot of that stuff. Let me give an example of what I feel an example of her enabling is. There was a time where my brother punched me in the face, and I had a complete meltdown after that, and I was repeating the same thing over and over and over again. I was like, hit me again. Like, I just was repeating the same thing over. I wasn't thinking logically. I literally for 30 minutes was repeating the same thing, and, like, you know, approaching my brother, like getting in his face and telling him, like, you want to punch me again, and I kept on repeating it, and my mom kind of got in the way, right? And I feel like my mom never really like knows how to like discipline my brother or like show him that behavior isn't okay. Wanting an escape. I think a really big reason why I didn't realize a lot of these things about myself was was because I was extremely distracted by my own toxicity in my home and my family. I feel like I was so distracted by it that I never really got a opportunity to look within myself, and because there was so much toxicity and just really bad energy, it was really affecting me to the point where I really wanted an escape. And literally any time that I got that I didn't have to be home, I took advantage of it. I stayed in after school. I hung out with my friends for a really long time after school. I transferred to another high school, and I had a friend who I had a free period, but she had a class, and I could have easily just gone home early and stuff, but I hung out with her after class, and then we ended up hanging out for like a while longer, and then we went home. So anytime I could get away from my house, I took it. And I think I convinced myself that I was an extrovert because I kind of needed friends in order to, for some reason I didn't feel comfortable doing these things alone, but I kind of felt like I needed friends in order to like get out of my house and like have people to do stuff with. And there was a time where I was going to college and my parents didn't, well, it was during COVID, so my parents didn't want me to go out. But I was really, really in a lot of mental turmoil, like really, really bad. And I just said, fuck it. I was like, I don't care. I need this. I'm really unhappy and I really need to sneak out and hang out with my friends because I'm just in a lot of mental turmoil. So I found myself wanting to escape a lot. And my next point was kind of something that I already just said, but yeah, like I thought I was an extroverted person, but I just relied on having friends or trying to make friends or being friendly to people in hopes that we can have a connection so we can do activities outside of my house that creates a distraction for me. And now I'm gonna get into some autistic traits that I have. Don't feel discouraged if a lot of my traits don't align with certain things that you may do, but I feel like a lot of you guys aren't really aware that you guys have these traits because, once again, we don't really know what autism is and we don't really know how it presents in people, especially ethnic people that had to learn how to mask for such a long time, okay? So my first point is sense of identity. I had a horrific identity problem. Literally right after I dropped out of college, or after I hung out with some girls for the first time in forever since I have before. And I think since I spent so much time alone and actually enjoyed my time alone, I kind of forgot what my mask was. And I'll explain what a mask is in a second, sorry. But I kind of forgot like how to act, how to play that role. And I felt, you know, extremely anxious when I was with them. I was like, why are you talking like this? Is this annoying? Did I just say something stupid? Like, that was something that I dealt with a lot. And then once I got home from hanging out with them, I felt extremely exhausted. These are sweet girls. There's nothing wrong with them. They're really nice. They're really friendly. I just have a really hard time trying to be myself around people because I got so used to masking. And I'm gonna explain what masking is because a lot of you probably don't know. If you've ever hung out with people and then when you get home you feel like, what the fuck was I doing? Who the fuck were you? What? That's a mask. And I have felt like that a lot of times, and I didn't realize that that was connected to autism, but there were a lot of times that I would come home from hanging out with a certain group of people that I don't normally hang out with, and I was just like, who the fuck was I? Like, why were you acting like that? You know? And another big aspect of masking is you may have a lot of different friend groups, and it's normal to have different friend groups. Everyone has different friend groups, but you show a different side of yourself to each friend group, and you hide parts of yourself to every single one. For example, I had a really hyper feminine, like funny, goofy, like gay LGBTQ friend group where I was like, slay, like I talked a lot like that. I was like sis, and I used a lot of hand movements like this because this is gay community hand movements, I feel like. And I am part of the gay community. I'm bisexual and I'm also non-binary, and it doesn't mean that I'm not this person. It's just I'm not always gonna have the energy to be that person, if that makes sense. I also had a lot of guy friends in high school and middle school, and I felt like I acted like a completely different person with them. I felt like I was like, oh, what's up, bro? Like, for real, I can be really mad. Like, I can act like a mask ass homie, but I can also act like a slay ass queen. So, like, if you have a lot of these inconsistencies with the way that you act with certain people, and you're like, how come I act this way with these people, but I act this way with these people, and I act this way with these people? Like, for example, my friend group that I play video games with, I don't feel like I have to hide any part of myself when I'm talking to them. At first I did. At first I hid the hyper feminine part of myself because I thought that that was something that they didn't like, but I realized that it's a part of me. I'm hyper feminine as well as I can be masculine. They're two different parts of me, and that's why I consider myself non-binary, because I feel like labels are so stupid. I had like a couple different masks with a couple different friend groups, and if you feel that way, that might be a really, really big sign of autism. Okay, eye contact. I did not realize how much I struggled. I did not realize how much I struggled with eye contact until I spent so much time alone. And the reason why I struggle with eye contact isn't because of well, sometimes it is because of social anxiety, but it's really because I need to look away from my point of focus, and you can probably notice me doing it a lot right now. I need to look away from my point of focus to be able to like process and like recall my next thought. Like, I have a hard time recalling thoughts when I'm making eye contact with people, and I feel like part of it is because I feel like I have to always read people's faces when I'm talking and see if they're genuinely caring about the stuff that I talk about, because I talk a lot, which is an autistic trait. So there's like a bunch of different reasons why certain people with autism can struggle with eye contact, and I feel like those are two of the reasons why I do. Migraines. In middle school and in high school, I don't remember like really early in my life, but I remember getting a lot of migraines. And I thought it was caffeine addiction or caffeine withdrawal. I thought it was tobacco withdrawal. I thought there was something wrong with my brain. I got my brain scanned. There was nothing wrong with it. I've gone a couple months without drinking coffee. Yeah, I got a lot of migraines. And we tried to figure out what the problem was, and we could not figure it out. And I think the migraines are attributed to the overstimulation you can get from being around too much noise. And I can get into that in a second. Another autistic trait. When I was a kid, I used to rock back and forth really hard when my mom would play music that I liked. And she would always play Mexican music. That was all I listened to growing up. I didn't really have a lot of like R&B influence or rap influence because my parents were just very Mexican. And when my mom would play Mexican music, she said that I would rock back and forth because I really loved to dance. It was not because I really love to dance. And it might be because of my autism, but it was me stemming from really enjoying the music and like being happy, and I needed to outwardly present that. Chewing cheeks. So whenever I'm like just laying down or doing nothing, like I'm not really doing a lot of physical activity, a way that I stim a lot is by chewing the inside of my cheeks. And I didn't realize I did this until Irene from the Thought Spot pointed this out. And I was like, wait, I'm doing that right now. And I was like, what the heck? And I can literally feel the lining of my cheeks kind of have a couple scars from how much I do it. I have really, really sensitive hearing. When I was in elementary school, I distinctly remember this time where these girls were like talking about me, but they were like 3 tables away from me. Like, it was at a weird distance where it's like, bitch, how the fuck could you hear that? Like, what? How could you hear that? And it's because I have really sensitive ears. And I actually I didn't notice this until like I really started paying attention to myself, but when there's other noises going around while I'm talking, I get extremely, extremely distracted, and it's really hard for me to focus. If someone is talking to me at a restaurant, like I just went out to eat with my boyfriend, and this waiter, like I had the worst time with this waiter because I feel like we were both super socially awkward, but I could not hear a thing he was telling me because of all of the noise that was going around from the restaurant, and that made me super anxious because I was kind of responding to him as if I knew what the hell he was saying, but I didn't know, so he was probably like, look at this weirdo. But that's another thing. I'm really uncoordinated. I drop stuff all the time. I bump into things all the time. I literally hit my head earlier today doing something really simple. I hurt myself a lot doing really simple tasks. I have a hard time lying. It's really, really hard for me to lie to people that I have respect for. So I really like open and direct communication. If there's something that's bothering me about anyone, I literally, I struggle if I don't get it off of my chest, and I hate lying. There were so many times where there were secrets that I wanted to keep from my mom, but I always ended up telling her because I was just really uncomfortable with lying to her. Mimicking. I used to mimic all the freaking time. I used to want to make these phrases from Hannah Montana because I loved Hannah Montana. Oh my god, I wish I can remember the phrase that I used to want to say. Man, I'm really mad that I don't know. But there were some phrases that I would watch from Hannah Montana that I would start saying at school. Or there were certain times where I thought someone said something really interesting and I was like, I'm gonna start saying that word. Or there was a couple friends in my life where I really liked the way that they laughed. So I started practicing how to laugh like them, and I started laughing like them. And that's really weird. Mutism after an argument. This is a really, really big one, and I notice it with literally my whole family, because my whole family is like the only people I argue with, honestly. But every single time I get in a really big argument with anyone in my family, I have a really, really hard time looking at them after, and I have a really, really hard time talking to them after. I feel like it would be a lot easier if they came to me after like I collected myself than me going to them. I had really, really bad anxiety with my dad, and my dad kind of mistook it as me being angry with him, which in turn made him angry with me, and then I would kind of be ready to like approach him, and then he'd be super like off and angry for like some reason, and then I'd get really anxious, which led me to be mute again. And me and my mom got in a really, really big argument recently where I felt really hurt by her, and I literally was like, I'm cutting all these people off. I can't. I really felt like cutting off my mom, and that's big because I have a really strong attachment to her. But I had a really, really hard time looking her in the eye after our argument. I could not look her in the eye. Humming with music or singing along with music, or making weird noises while music is playing. I can't not hum or sing when a song is playing. If I know the lyrics to a song, I have to sing them. I can't not do it. And if I don't know the lyrics, I will hum the notes of the song. Like if I know the melody, I will hum it with the song, or I will make really, really weird noises with the song as it's playing. And another thing I do that's connected with music is if I have a song that's stuck in my head, I will stim like certain pieces of it out, but I will do it in a really, really weird way. Like, for example, I don't know if anyone that watches this video listens to the Sacred Souls, but one of their songs has been trending lately, where it's like, pretty lady, you got me. But I sing it in a really weird way where I'm like, pretty lady, you got me. Like I literally do it like that out loud, just me chilling at home, and I just do it. Crying as a baby. This sounds stupid, but give me 1 second. Okay, so my mom told me that as a baby, there were certain points where I would not stop crying, no matter what they did, no matter how, like, they literally followed the entire checklist of what a baby could possibly need when they're when they're crying, and they did not know what to do with me. They fed me, they burped me, they looked if my diaper was dirty, they whatever it was that a baby needs, they did it. And it wasn't until they put me in a room by myself to cry by myself where I actually started to, you know, shush and relax. And I think this has a lot to do with overstimulation. Maybe I was really overstimulated by whatever environment I was in, and I ended up getting a migraine, which my parents were not able to see, and I was not able to communicate that to my parents. So what did I do? I cried and I cried until they put me in a room by myself and I got what I wanted. Anemia. So this is a really big one, and I hope some of y'all can relate to this, but I get cold really, really easily. I'm really sensitive to temperature, but I get cold really, really easily. And I think the reason why I get cold so easily now is because at my previous job, I literally used to work next to an oven. So I was I literally got used to being in the heat, and I kind of forced my body to get used to being in a hotter environment. So now my body is, like, every time my body gets cold, I'm really sensitive to it. I can be wearing thick socks, I can be wearing my slippers and walk around like not barefoot in my house, and my feet will still be freezing cold. And like there will be moments, my boyfriend got me a heated blanket, so I don't have this problem anymore. But in the winter, when I was super, super, super cold, I would hate getting into bed raw. I would hate getting into bed without like just getting into it, because the whole sensation of the cold blankets all over my body was really was a lot for me, and it was really uncomfortable, to the point where I got my hair dryer and I would just blow dry like inside of the covers of my bed until it got warm enough for me to actually sleep inside of it. And I swore that I had anemia because of this, because a lot of people with low iron get cold really easily. But there were multiple times where I would go donate blood, and they said my blood was fine, that there weren't any issues, and I was just like, I was like, but I'm anemic though. Like, I couldn't accept this, so I just continued saying I was anemic. But now I realize it wasn't anemia, it's just me having sensory issues because of my autism. Earthquakes. Okay, there are so many times where I'm with my boyfriend and I'm like, did you feel that? Did you feel that? And he's like, no. Or there's a lot of times where I'm at my house and I'm sitting still and I feel like a little rumble, and I asked my mom, or I asked my brother, I'm like, oh, did you feel that? And they're like, no. And I feel like I'm going insane, but I genuinely think that because I'm autistic, I feel like, you know how there's always earthquakes going on? They say that there's always earthquakes going on. I genuinely feel like maybe I'm just a little more sensitive to the smaller earthquakes. Not every single one that's going on right now, but I think I'm a little more sensitive than the average person on feeling certain earthquakes. Food and eating disorders. So I actually learned that a lot of people with autism develop eating disorders, either because we have like really, really stubborn food preferences. Like a lot of autistic people can't eat because of certain textures, and I feel like I'm like that. I can eat nopales. I don't know if you guys had nopales. Like, I can eat them, but I hate the texture of them. Like, I despise it and I just can't eat it. Like, it's gross to me. Okay, eating disorders. So there was a point in my life where I was super, super obsessed with calories and like how many calories I was eating throughout the day. I cut off a lot of things from my diet. There was a literal time where I would eat salads every day because I was trying to lose weight. So I told my mom, make me chicken salad, please, mom. Make me chicken salad, please, mom. And because of that, I got tired of grilled chicken. I hate grilled chicken. I will eat it, but I freaking hate it. And another weird relationship I had with food, since I was so obsessed with like food and calories and the way that I looked and stuff, any pastry that I would eat, like anything that was a high in calorie food, I would spit it out. Like, I would chew it up and I'd spit it out. Like let's say my mom brought me a brownie from 7-Eleven, or my mom brought me a churro from Costco, or she brought me a concha or whatever, I would chew it and I'd spit it out, because I was really guilty of like actually putting that inside of my body and it affecting the way that I look. And I was just like, nope, like I'm gonna spit it out. I'm gonna just get the flavor and I'm gonna spit it out. Another thing, I was literally so obsessed with like losing weight, and so obsessed with that. I'm not like I'm over that, or at least I've coped with it better now. But I was so obsessed with like losing weight that I would eat entire bags of prunes in hopes that it would give me like diarrhea, so I would like lose weight. Or I saw laxatives like that my mom bought from the store, and I would literally take those laxatives hoping that they will give me like diarrhea, because I was literally like so obsessed with looking skinny. So and I think that is an eating disorder. The other things, I don't know if they're eating disorders, but I know that eating laxatives is eating disorders. It's related to it. Another thing with food though, I really love bread, to the point where I still chew up bread and spit it out, just because I really love the texture of eating bread. Bad with transitions. This can be literally with big things, or it can be with small things. So getting out of bed is hard. Going and making food in the kitchen is hard. Programming myself to shower is hard. Every single activity that I do throughout the day, there's a lot of time in between it where I'm just either disassociated or I'm just distracted. And I think that has a lot to do with my ADHD as well. But I'm really bad with transitions, and every single summer, actually the first ever time that I had a full-on meltdown because of a transition in my life was because it was like the first time that my mom had ever taken me to preschool, and I was so freaking terrified of like being around all of those people and having to like not being home and not being like in my comfort zone, basically, that I threw a full-on tantrum. I distinctly, like, it was such a traumatic experience for me that I still remember it exactly in my head. And I was literally clinging on to my mom, and I did not want to let her go because I was so afraid of going to school. And literally every summer before like the next school year, I would get extremely anxious. Like the week before, I would get extremely anxious, and I dreaded having to go back to school. And I didn't even have well, I had a hard time, but I hated it, but I was intelligent. Like I was able to get my work done and stuff. I had no issue with that. I just hated it. Like I really hated school. And I would ask like some of my friends, like, oh, like you don't hate school? And they're like, no, I like coming and seeing my friends. I like this. Da, da, da. And I was like, why? Like, isolation. I feel like another autistic trait that a lot of people experience is the feeling of being isolated. Like, it doesn't matter how many friends you have, you still feel really isolated for some reason. You still feel like no one actually understands you. And you still feel like there's really nobody out there that genuinely wants to listen to you and like help you in a time of need. And I really felt that. Male friends. So this was a thing that I mentioned earlier, but an autistic trait for females is that we have either a lot of friends that are older than us, a lot of friends that are younger than us, or friends of the opposite sex. And I used to have a whole ass group of guy friends in high school. And I used to be so scared of talking about this because of the whole pick-me thing. And I was like, I don't want to seem like a pick-me. I don't want to seem... But now I know why I had a lot of guy friends. I'm a very blunt person. You can tell by the tone of my voice. Like, I'm very brutally honest with people. I don't like to lie to people. Like, if someone is asking for my genuine, honest opinion, I'll give it to them. And a lot of the times, people don't really want your honest opinion. Like, they ask for it, but they don't really want it. And then when you tell it to them, they're, like, hurt. It's like, what do you want from me? I was a gifted kid, and I actually learned that gifted kids have high rates of being neurodivergent. Being gay or non-binary can actually be a autistic trait, and I think the reason why this can be an autistic trait is Autistic people are always questioning society. They're always questioning, why is society like this? Why do I have to dress this way? Or why do I have to act this way around certain people when they're clearly being assholes, you know? And because we're always questioning society, we get to the question where it's like, why do men have to just like women? Or why do women have to just like men? Why can't we have the option of whatever we want? And personally, for me, it's like, why do I have to like specifically one gender? Why can't it be both genders? Like, for me, I just don't understand why we've been so accustomed to train people that they have to only like one gender. I'm like, I just don't agree with that. Same with being non-binary. Because of the different masks that I've put on, I have really hyper feminine traits sometimes, or I have really hyper masculine traits sometimes. So I identify as non-binary because I have that dissonance in myself where it's like, how come I can act so masc in this situation, but I act so femme in this situation? So for me, being non-binary is more like, why the fuck do I have to be a woman? Or why do I always have to portray myself as a woman? Why can't I sometimes dress like a dude? Why can't I sometimes wear sneakers and, you know, wear baggy clothes, or, you know, not have to wear my hair down and not have to wear so much makeup, you know? It's like, why do these social rules exist? And I think that's why a lot of people that are autistic end up being either gay or non-binary. And there's actually a label for non-binary people who identify as non-binary because of their autism, but I forgot what it's called. I think it's neuro non-binary. I'm not entirely sure. Hobbies and interests. I learned how to crochet before I turned 10. I learned how to sew before I turned 10. And there's probably a couple other things that I learned how to do, but normal kids don't do that, I feel like, right? Is that weird? Because I remember a time where I literally like made this, oh, do I have it? No, I don't. It's somewhere around here, but I don't remember where I put it. But I literally made like a high-low skirt, and people were so impressed with it, like to the point where a couple people actually it was just one person, but someone actually wanted to buy that off of me as a 6th grader, a skirt. Like, you can't tell me that's not autistic talent. I'm just saying. What's another one? Let's see. Stuttering. I stutter a lot, but I think I've gotten a lot better at stuttering, and lately I just say a lot. And I hate it because I feel like I sound so stupid when I say but I think I really, really need to say to like recall information. I think I need those spacing words, because if I don't say it's gonna be hard for me to continue the point that I have. Bullying. There were so many times where people were blatantly bullying me to my face, and I was too oblivious to even realize it. Same with flirting, honestly. A lot of people flirted with me. A lot of people showed that they had a crush on me, like, very clearly, and I just wasn't able to pick up on that. And I think it's because of my autism, but there was a couple times where like in 6th grade, there was this person. I had this computer class in 6th grade, and at first I thought this guy like genuinely wanted to be friends with me. He was older than me, but I was like, oh, like maybe he wants to be friends with me, I don't know. But he would start like pointing out the stuff that I do, the way that I type, or the way, like, I guess I was really slow at typing or something, and he would make fun of me for it. And there were like other things that he would point out about me where he just wouldn't leave me alone. And you know, I started to realize this isn't my friend. This is literally like, he's an asshole. And I would literally be scared and anxious to go to that class because I knew that he would be there, and he was just an asshole. Like, if you're seeing this, fuck you. You bullied an autistic person. And there was this other girl, in 6th grade, I had a class with a bunch of like 7th graders and 8th graders, and there was this girl who I thought she wanted to be my friend, but then she started getting really like hostile towards me. I don't know, maybe she was laughing at me, like laughing with me, but like making fun of me. But she started getting really, really hostile towards me, and like actually giving me a really hard time. And I remember I just remembered this recently where like she was literally like, I got fed up with the way that she was treating me, because it would always start off at first with me thinking that they wanted to be my friend, and then it would turn into like them just being assholes towards me. And I remember I got so fed up, I was like, well, at least I'm not fat like you, go hit the gym or something like that. And she started crying. She started crying and she went to the bathroom, and I was like, you get what you give. Weird noises. I make a lot of weird noises. I've always done this. I think people just kind of like brush it off as if it's not like weird because they accept it's me, but it's like, it's because of my autism. There was a, I play video games with like a bunch of my friends, and when I told these people like I was autistic, they were like, you're not autistic, like there's no way. And I was like, I was kind of mad, because I was like, why would I say something if I don't know shit about it? Like, obviously I'm gonna do the research on whether or not I'm autistic before I fucking say it. Like, I'm not just gonna throw that around just because of one TikTok I see. No, I go and I researched. I went on Google, I took assessments, I watched a lot of YouTube videos. Like, if I say something, it's because, if I say something confidently about myself, it's because I did the research. And I was a little mad at my friends for like dismissing that about me. But then like there was this time that we were playing together, and I was like, bro, I don't understand how you guys don't think I'm autistic. There was literally a period in time where I would just start barking randomly, and y'all didn't even like bat an eye. Like, you guys were just so used to me acting like a weirdo that you didn't even pick up on those things. But yeah, I make a lot of weird noises. Stomach problems. Autistic people develop a lot of stomach problems because of their food aversions, or just like problems that they have with eating. So I think that's why I have a lot of stomach problems. Well, not a lot of them, but every time I eat a meal, I burp like really, really aggressively after, and it's really bad. And my parents like would yell at me for it, but if I just keep that shit inside of me, like, I'm gonna feel really uncomfortable, and my stomach is gonna start hurting. I'm not gonna let that happen. What the heck? No, I'm a burp. Anyways, burnout, suicide, and self-harm. So this is another topic that I'm going to be talking about, and it is a little triggering, so I'm sorry if anybody gets like a little disheartened. I'm sorry. I don't mean to trigger you, but you can always pause this if you do feel a little triggered. But there were a lot of times where I didn't really contemplate suicide, but I didn't want to exist. And I feel like this is something that a lot of autistic people go through. So there were a lot of times where I got in like fights with my parents, and I just felt so misunderstood. And I felt like, you know, they weren't really listening to me, and I just hated being like, you know, in having to be a part of it, you know. So I was just like, why do I even have to exist? Like, why did my parents have me, you know? Why was I brought into this world in such a hostile environment? Like, I didn't deserve any of this. I would think like that all the time. And the first time I ever self-harmed, the first time I ever self-harmed was, I think, in 6th grade. And I didn't do it on my wrists because my parents are very like nosy, and they will easily be able to tell. But what I would do is I would get a pair of scissors, and I would open it. I don't want to display it. I don't even want to bother because I don't want to trigger anyone. But I would open up a pair of scissors, and I would start slashing my thigh. And I did that. No one noticed it, and I didn't want anyone to notice it. It wasn't really because I wanted anyone to notice. It was more, I don't know, to feel something. Like, I don't even know why I did it. Whatever. And another way that I self-harmed was I would cut my fingertips with the scissors. So I would slash my fingertips with the scissors, and if anyone would ask me questions, I would just be like, oh, I just got a bunch of paper cuts. So it was very easy to pass that off. Loneliness, okay? I always felt like I had a lot of friends. Like, I felt like I had a lot of people that I knew that I could have reached out to whenever I was going through stuff. But for some reason, And I think this is something that a lot of autistic people go through, and if it's not autism, maybe it's BPD. For some reason, every single friendship that I had, even if it was a really, really close friend, I never felt comfortable reaching out to them when something like hard was happening. Or actually, no, I did feel comfortable reaching out to a couple people, but in recent years, like, I just stopped. Like, I stopped making close friends. I cut off a lot of the people that I used to be friends with, and cutting people off is an autistic trait as well. I forgot to mention that. I'm very easy to cut people off because at the end of the day, my way of thinking is I can always find someone else, you know? I can always find someone else that meets the needs that you met, you know? Yeah, with a lot of friends, like, there's this friend that I have that I met in my junior year of high school, and I love him. He's one of my, like, really, like, he genuinely is one of my best friends. I call him my bi bestie because he came out as bi recently, and I'm also bi. And there were, like times recently where I was going through a lot of like, just really bad depression and really bad, like, emotional turmoil. And like, I got so used to suffering by myself because my parents didn't really, like, know how to soothe me. So I got so used to, like, suffering by myself that even though he was such a close friend, and even though we've had more vulnerable moments with each other, I still would ask the question, like, is this acceptable? Like, am I gonna look weird if I just reach out to him? Like, am I overstepping my boundary? I always felt like I was overstepping. So if you know me, if anyone sees this video and you feel like, you know, I considered you a friend and you feel like I never really reached out to you, it's because I genuinely had a lot of anxiety when it came to reaching out to you, because I never felt like I was at a good place with anyone. Like, I always felt like I would be overstepping people's boundaries if I, like, reached out to them randomly, or if I replied to them wrong or something like that. College and suicide contemplation. So the first time I ever really contemplated suicide was in my first semester of college, and I think the reason why was it was such a huge transitional period for me. It was really hard for me because I already struggled so much with going back to school from summer break, just in regular school and all the 7 years of school that I did, right? 7 years? I don't know. But in elementary school and middle school, I already struggled so much going back to school after summer break. For me to have to go to college online during a pandemic was really, really fucking brutal for me. And I had a lot of issues with my parents because they didn't really disagree with some of the decisions that I made about my major, because I was like, I think I was in the first day of ever being in the class for my major, and I hated it. The professor was so boring, and I think it's one of the most boring majors ever. I think a lot of colleges just lack making stuff fun, and they don't even bother, but whatever. But yeah, I was in that class and I hated it. I hated it so much. I was like, yeah, no, I don't know what the hell I was thinking, but I don't like this. And I instantly dropped that class and that major. And I was gonna hide it from my mom, but once again, I don't feel comfortable lying to my mom. So eventually I ended up just telling her, and she was super disappointed in me. And I think she even told my dad, and my dad also, like, showed that he was super disappointed in me. And it really hurt a lot because it just made me start having these feelings again of, like, ugh, like, why do I have to exist? Why? If I wasn't here, I wouldn't have to be dealing with all of this stuff. Like, why did my parents have to have me? I had a lot of those thoughts, but I think, like, I snuck out with my friends one time because I was really fucking suffering, and I didn't even give a shit about what my parents wanted at that point. I was like, I genuinely need to leave my house and go have some, like, time with my friends right now because I'm suffering. And my brother ended up snitching on me that I had done that, and both of my parents, like, wreaked their havoc on me, and we had a really, really bad argument, and I was like, just in a lot of emotional distress. And that's when I first started contemplating suicide, because I was like, what the like, if I can't be happy in my life, why should I even live? If I have to live according to what these people want from me, why should I even be alive? And my dad has a lot of like medication that he saves, because I think my parents just don't believe in taking a lot of medication. And one night, like, I was just sobbing in my room, like, crying in a corner, and I went and I took like a bunch of pills from one of the bottles that he had, and I put them in a little baggie, and I was like just staring at it like, I'm so sick of this, like, that like, I don't even remember what pulled me out of that. I think I was genuinely just too scared to do it, and I'm glad, because I mean, I'm a lot happier now that I'm not dealing with all of that stuff. But it was really a really hard time for me, and there were a couple other times where I contemplated it, but that was one of the first like really big times where I was so afraid, and I was just so done. I'm literally tearing up right now because I'm remembering exactly how I felt, and I can't believe I even got to that point. On to my next topic. Now I'm going to talk about the Latino culture. I'm going to talk about why it may be that a lot of Latinos I'm going to talk about why it may be that, you know, we're very quick to dismiss autism in a lot of people. And I'm going to be talking about like the trauma within our culture, and I'm going to be talking about a lot of feelings of shame within our culture, because unfortunately people in our culture love to make us feel ashamed for not functioning sometimes. Abuse is normalized. There's a lot of emotional abuse, there's a lot of physical abuse, and there's a lot of verbal abuse. It's very normalized in Latino households for your parents to abuse you, and a lot of the times your parents don't even realize they're abusing you because they've been through so much emotional abuse themselves that it's just a pattern that they repeat, and they don't even realize it's abusive what they do. For example, I had to self-soothe a lot. Anytime I got in an argument with my parents, there was never a moment where there were a lot of moments where, you know, we would get in arguments, but like we never had a reconcile. Like we never had like a reconnection where we came and talked and like, you know, hey, this and this and this. And I feel like it's a parent's responsibility after you get in an argument with your kid to go and talk to them and go and console them, because how are we supposed to do that on our own? You know, us as children, we're not able to do that. So unfortunately, we had to learn how to self-soothe a lot, which I feel like led to a lot of attachment problems, and I'll get into that in 1 second. The silent treatment. Anytime that me and my mom would get in an argument, she would give me the silent treatment, which was actually a form of emotional abuse. And I didn't know this until I started myself doing a lot of research on mental health and stuff. And I mean, I'm not gonna blame her. Her mom probably gave her the silent treatment. She probably thought that that was normal. But there would be moments where I would literally beg her to talk to me and she wouldn't want to talk to me, and it was really heartbreaking. Now we're gonna talk about another thing in our culture, which is machismo, misogyny. There is a lot of misogyny in Latino culture, and I experienced it firsthand. My mom used to always tell me to do chores, but she would never tell my brother to do it. Or if she told my brother to do chores, she wouldn't like bother him to do it again. So like if I didn't wash the dishes, my mom would be like, why didn't you wash the dishes? Wash the dishes. Why didn't you wash the dishes? But if she would ever, on the rare occurrence where she would tell my brother to wash the dishes or clean something, she would just tell him once and that's it. She wouldn't really consistently like pressure him. I noticed that. So, you know, I was left to take on a lot of responsibilities that felt really unfair to me, because it's like, why the fuck do I have to do all this stuff, but this motherfucker can stay in his room playing his video games? Like, I don't understand. This is really unfair. Because of all of this misogyny and this fear to have fragile masculinity, I think it creates a lot of narcissistic men, which is the next point that I'm gonna make. Our culture creates a lot of narcissistic men because one, they're raised never really being taught to acknowledge their emotions. They're raised to ignore their emotions. They're not allowed to cry. In Hispanic culture, un hombre no debe de estar llorando, which is not true. You know, it's if you as a person constantly ignore your emotions and don't let yourself feel your emotions, you're going to develop issues, severe issues. And another aspect of that is in Latino households and Hispanic households, men don't have to do as much work as women do, and they kind of realize that, and I think they take advantage of that because, you know, my mom had a lot of siblings, and I can assure it was probably mainly the women that did most of the chores and most of the caretaking and most of the, you know, chores, like duties. And I'm sure men had a lot of things done for them that it's just like, it's unfair. And that's another thing about my autism. It's like, why is our society like this? Why are we so unfair towards women? Why can't women and men be equal? Why do I have to wash these dishes but my brother can freeball it in his room and do nothing? Like, why am I getting in trouble for all of these things when my brother isn't even told to do these things, you know? And I think because our siblings or your parents' siblings saw this so much, I think they genuinely get a rise out of it, and it creates narcissism. I've already seen so many narcissistic tendencies in my brother, and unfortunately, people with autism tend to attract a lot of narcissistic people, and I've already seen a lot of patterns in my own family with some of my aunts and uncles. I'm sorry if you get offended by this, but I've noticed these patterns. People with autism tend to be taken advantage of by narcissistic people because we have an ability to, we don't need people. We isolate ourselves like naturally because we just like our solitude. We like being alone. We don't really feel like we need people to regulate us or make us feel something, and narcissistic people take advantage of that isolation. Whether it's on purpose or not on purpose that we isolate ourselves, they still take advantage of it. And we're really easy targets to be manipulated and abused. And a lot of autistic people have a lot more difficulty leaving abusive relationships because either they don't really pick up on when they're being treated poorly, or they're just able to regulate themselves without needing to speak to anyone sometimes. You know, there's a moment where you're like, oh, I need someone to talk to, and then you're like, no, I'm fine, I feel better. Collectivism. I'm gonna talk about collectivism right now, and I feel like in our culture there's a lot of collectivism. We're not an independent culture. When we grow up, we have to, every time we go to a social gathering, we have to say hi to every single person individually. And a lot of us didn't like that as kids, and we were kind of forced to have to do that. And I personally didn't really understand why. I was just like, girl, like, I'm just trying to chill. I don't know how to say hi to everyone. But I got so used to it that at this point I just do it. But there's a lot of collectivism in our society, and I think because we're such a collective society, we don't really get to spend a lot of time alone. And I think spending a lot of time alone is really crucial for someone to learn about themselves. Unfortunately, we're so wrapped up in school, we're so wrapped up in work, a lot of us probably live with our families still, or a lot of us don't have money to live by ourselves, so we're always surrounded by people, and we don't really have a lot of time to reflect on our emotions and to reflect on who we really are as people. We have this sense of identity that we believe, but then, you know, once you get an opportunity to spend a lot of time with yourself and actually realize, oh, I'm not like this, wow, that's insane. And I think here for me, like it happened with me. And I think because we're such a collective culture and we don't really get to spend a lot of time by ourselves, it's hard. But I really recommend trying your best to just isolate yourself for a little while. Try your hardest. I know a lot of people, you know, there's necessity, there's bills to be paid, but spend a couple hours by yourself. don't be afraid of it. Like, sometimes it's really, really crucial to understanding who you are as a person, and you know, you pay a lot of attention to certain things that you do more often. And I think a lot of the collectivism within our culture also leads to us developing masks, because just literally forcing us to saludar people, like, we have to put on this face like, oh, hi, like, how are you, you know, and it literally pressures us into putting on masks because we're always around people, and Latinos just are a very collective culture once again. And then the whole thing about the self-soothing and how it can lead to avoidant personality types. I think a lot of Latinos have avoidant personality tendencies, and I think avoidant personalities and just people that are traumatized in general have a lot of similar traits to autistic people. So I think that because we've, you know, us as autistic people struggle with social stuff, and then, you know, people that have been traumatized have a lot of, you know, traits that they have from their trauma, like, we end up becoming very good very good match. I'm autistic. Have some patience with me. We end up being a really good match for each other, because I saw this TED Talk that said, like, neurodivergent people don't have social deficits, we just communicate better with each other. And same goes for us with trauma survivors. Trauma survivors have a lot of tendencies that they have to heal from that come from their trauma, and a lot of those tendencies happen to also be autistic traits. So that's why a lot of us get along really well. And maybe because in our culture, it's a lot harder to distinguish, is it trauma or is it autism? So I think the main question that you have to ask yourself when you're thinking about this is, did these traits start when I was a child? And I think a really, really good sign for me was the whole, like, rocking back and forth thing, and a lot of things that had to do with friends. Like, my best friend in elementary school was such a bully to me, and I let her bully me. Like, I straight up let her treat me like shit, and I was like, bestie. These traits have been around for a while. So I think when you're worried about that, or when you have that confusion of is it because my parents abused me or is it because I'm autistic, just really think back to your childhood and how you acted. And I think if you have sensory issues as well. Some sensory issues might be from PTSD. It's hard to distinguish. Once again, it's up to you to research. I can't really distinguish that. And another thing, I feel like since American parents don't abuse their kids as much and give their kids the leeway they need to grow into, like, healthy, self-sufficient human beings, I think in the white culture it's a lot easier to distinguish who's autistic and who's not autistic. Whereas in the Latino culture, a lot of us have very similar traits due to our trauma and due to our autism that a lot of us don't know, or, like, we can't really tell the difference. And, you know, there's a lot of undiagnosed Latinos too that a lot of their traits might be from trauma or might be because they're autistic, and it's really hard to tell. And I've noticed that pattern, which is an autistic trait, pattern recognition. Oh, another point I wanted to make. I think autistic people get lonelier and lonelier as we grow, because a lot of people that are just affected by trauma can be healed. A lot of the trauma that we go through is not super, super severe trauma to the point where we develop, like, disorders. A lot of it is just trauma where we can just move on from it, and we can go to a therapist, learn the thought patterns that we have, learn how to address these thought patterns, and learn how to get over them. And I honestly think that I healed from a lot of my trauma, because there's a lot of tendencies that I had that I don't have anymore. Like, I used to be super insecure, and I think it's because my parents never really reassured me or never really boosted my confidence. I'm not insecure at all anymore. I've learned to be very secure within myself. Doesn't matter how I look, doesn't matter what I say, like, doesn't matter what people think of me. I'm not insecure. And I really, like, I think after accepting my autism, I just stopped caring what other people think of me. Like, I know who I am, and I now have a very strong sense of self that I just don't think I can get affected by, you know, that kind of insecurity. And another thing, I used to have a really big fear of abandonment, to the point where I didn't even want to get in relationships because I was so afraid of being in a similar relationship to the relationship of my parents. And I also just had a huge fear of abandonment because I had like a really big abandonment wound from when I was little. So I didn't want to get in a relationship because I was like, what if they start treating me like how my dad treats my mom? And I also didn't want to get in a relationship because it's, well, what if they leave me and then I just get super attached and I freaking have a whole emotional breakdown and go insane. And I think the only reason I thought that I'd have such a big reaction to the abandonment is also because my dog passed away, my first dog that I had, and oh, that shit hurt. I was so attached to my little baby, my little dog. His name was Noodles, and he passed away. And when I learned that he passed away, I was so sad. This is not the abandonment wound that I was referencing earlier, but I was in so much pain when my dog died. And I think it's because autistic people tend to develop a stronger bond with their pets and their animals. And I think that's why we get so sad, like a lot sadder than people would expect when our pets pass away. Like, it's a really emotional experience, but for us, it's a lot deeper. And I just want to say, like, I don't know if I've mentioned it, but people with autism experience emotions extremely deeply. We're very sensitive people, and it's out of our control, you know? I veered off from my point so far, but where I was going was people with trauma can heal themselves. I no longer care if people abandon me because I realized I really like being by myself. At the end of the day, if I gotta cut someone off, I'm gonna be happy by myself, and I can always find someone else to fill whatever, you know, spot that they had in my life. Yeah, so people that have trauma wounds are able to heal themselves, but people with autism aren't able to heal themselves. So I feel like as we get older, you know, people with the autism still have their autistic traits that are, you know, socially not acceptable, but then people with the trauma learn that some of their traits are socially not acceptable, and they start addressing them, and they start changing and becoming better people and improving to the point where they start perceiving them as bad people because they think that they have a lot of similar traits as people that have been through trauma have. So that's why a lot of autistic people, when they get older, you know, these people are healing. You know, when we were growing up, we had these similar traits, but these people started healing and, you know, figuring out why they have these certain problems, and their, you know, style of communication is changing to a more holistic style, when people with autism are never going to change. And we're always going to be the way that we are. It's literally the way that our brain is wired. So, you know, that's why we tend to get a lot more lonely. But what I would suggest for people that have autism and feel lonely, there are so many forums online where you can meet people. I joined the r/autism Reddit subreddit, and there's a lot of autism subreddits that you can find if you ever. And you know what? I think something that really helped me deal with my loneliness was literally listening to podcasts. My favorite podcast right now is Emergency Intercom with Enya and Drew. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but I absolutely love them. And low-key, I feel like, you know, they have a lot of traits. I'm not going to diagnose them, but I feel like the reason why I love them so much and I feel so connected to them sometimes is because we have a lot of similar traits. And I love their humor. They're so funny. And just having their podcast play in the background while I do certain things, it makes me feel less lonely. Playing podcasts helps. Maybe it won't feel entirely real to some people, and I understand that, but playing podcasts and playing, you know, people on the internet that are like-minded like you are helps you feel less alone. Oh, and then I wanted to go into shame. In our culture, there is a lot of shame. ¿No tienes vergüenza? ¿No tienes vergüenza? ¿No tienes vergüenza? No, I don't. But I guess I have to, because I guess you're saying I have to, so I'm gonna feel shame, right? Okay, laziness. A lot of autistic people struggle with executive dysfunction. A lot of people with ADHD struggle with executive dysfunction. It is really hard for us to get up and do something for some reason. It is really hard. And it's also really hard to switch from one task to another task to another task. It's really hard. And whenever our parents tell us to do something and we don't do it exactly at the moment that they tell us to do it, we get called lazy. And the fact that they pressure us to do it more and more and more literally only makes the situation worse. I've seen studies on it. Pressure to be a hard worker. This is really hard for autistic people because a lot of autistic people don't have the same capabilities and don't have the same energy as allistic people. We are constantly thinking. I literally have random thoughts throughout the entire day. That's why I decided to start being active on Twitter, because some of them are funny. But yes, there's so much pressure to be a hard worker. There's so much pressure to be, bien trabajadora, bien dura, blah, 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 to be strong. And it makes people, especially undiagnosed autistic people and people with ADHD, it makes us feel so shameful about our inability to get up and do something, about our lack of motivation, because a lot of these motivations are not intrinsic motivations, they're extrinsic. I think the reason why I struggled so much with college and like doing certain things for college was because the motivation was stemming from making my parents proud, and it wasn't actually coming from within myself. It was coming from this need to get validation from my parents. But at the end of the day, I'm never gonna be perfect. I'm never gonna be the spitting image of a daughter that they had. They had this image of me that I was this perfect, intelligent daughter, and then burnout, and now I have dyed hair. I'm gonna have a piercing soon. I dress like a slut. They don't even know how crazy I can get. I'm just saying. But yeah, it makes us feel really bad about ourselves, and I'm really glad that I found out I was autistic, because now I don't feel as guilty about myself for struggling with these things, because it's hard. It's literally a disability, so it's understandable why it's hard for you to get up and work. It's hard for you to go out and look for job interviews. It's hard for you to get up and clean your room sometimes. I understand, and you're totally valid for if you deal with those things. Pressure to be independent. I feel like this is something that's very, very common in our culture. People want us to like go to school, get a degree, get a really good job, make our own money, pay for our own house. And a lot of people are fully capable of doing that, but a lot of us, I'm not saying I need someone. Like, I feel like the pressure to be independent is more like the stigma where it's like, I don't need no man, I don't need this, I don't need that. Why are you putting so much pressure on me? Why are you making me feel like wanting to have a certain type of relationship with people? Like, why is that frowned upon? Not saying that, not even talking about emotional relationships, but sometimes we need to rely on other people. We need to ask for help. And it's already really really hard for autistic people to ask other people for help. There have been many times where I feel uncomfortable calling my friends to ask for help, so I call my family, and then I realize how insane I sound over the phone when I'm hysterically having a meltdown to one of my family members. And then I'm just like, wow, like they're judging me super hard and I hate myself and da, da, da. But that's why we struggle so much to ask for help, because we're so ashamed of the way that we react to certain things, and a lot of people just write it off as they're overreacting, they're sensitive. Yeah, we are, and we can't help it, and we need people, and a lot of people need to be more understanding of that. Bad and negative self-talk. A lot of us have really really bad self-talk. We talk horrendously about ourselves. We treat ourselves really really poorly, and that has to change. You're not lazy, you're not stupid, you're not slow. You just think differently than other people, and that's okay. You're not sensitive. You just literally don't have a choice. That's how your brain is. Don't feel ashamed of it. A lot of this self-talk that we have originates from our parents. A lot of our parents called us sensitive. A lot of our parents called us lazy. A lot of our parents, my parents never called me slow because I don't feel like I portrayed that, but still a lot of these things hurt and they make you start believing these things. The more a person gets called lazy, the more they're going to believe it, especially if it's a child. So it's really, really bad for you as a parent to be consistently labeling your child as lazy when maybe they have issues. Maybe they have something that's up with them. Maybe you should go to a doctor and see what's wrong. We just want attention. This is something I hear a lot from my family, and unfortunately, I can't change their perspective on whether or not I have autism or whether or not I struggle with mental health. I don't care at this point. So what if I want attention? Who cares? I don't care. Like, you can think whatever you want about me. We don't want attention. We're genuinely struggling with something. I wouldn't be saying I have these things if I haven't done the research, like I said earlier. Or we're just manipulating. My parents use this one on me a lot. They're like, oh, you're just saying that you are mentally ill because you want us to let you go out more. Oh, you're just saying that you're mentally ill because you want us to cut you some slack on school. You're just saying that you're mentally ill because you want to manipulate us and make us treat you in a different way and let you do certain things that you shouldn't be doing. No, that's not true. I mean, you can think whatever you want, but that's not true. And I also wanted to talk about one more thing, and a really big autistic trait that a lot of people overlook, or ADHD trait that a lot of people overlook because they think it's actually the opposite, is hyperfocus. So if you're able to do something for over like 5 hours in a day without taking a break, without eating, without feeding yourself, without drinking water, without even going to the bathroom, if you're able to hyperfocus on something for a really long time, there's a really good possibility that you may be neurodivergent. For example, when I used to crochet orders for my business, well, I still have my business, but back then, before I took my break from making the orders, I was able to literally, or not crochet because that hurts my wrist, but say I was sewing something. If I wanted to make a shirt, it will be done within that day because I will spend the entire day working on it. I'll forget to eat. I'll forget to drink water. I'll literally forget to take care of myself because I'm so immersed in this thing that I'm doing because I like doing it. One last thing that I wanted to talk about is misdiagnoses. A lot of people with autism get misdiagnosed with a lot of other mental illnesses, and a really common one is bipolar disorder. The kind of outbursts that people have and the bouts of depression that autistic people have, because autistic people do go through really bad bouts of depression. We have really bad anxiety. It's just a part of us. We can't really change that. But since we go through so many bouts of depression and burnout, people mistake that for bipolar disorder, and someone that might not know enough about themselves to realize that they're autistic could be describing to a doctor, well, I'm fine for months and then I just have a period where I'm just like, I can't function, I just want to be in bed all day, I can't go out, I don't even want to bother making food. It's very easy for a doctor to misdiagnose that as bipolar disorder because there's mania and there's depression, and people go through different waves of this throughout their diagnosis. But if more people were a little self-aware or aware of autism, they would know that, some of these things are actually a part of autism, and burnout is a really big part of autism. If you overwhelm yourself with too many things, you will experience burnout and you will get very depressed and you won't be able to function. There's going to be a lot of people, if you start thinking and turning the gears in your head that you may be autistic, and maybe there's going to be a point in time where you fully accept it and you're fully aware of it and you're like, yep, I'm autistic, but you don't have a diagnosis. There's going to be a lot of people that say, oh, well, like, it's not really autism if you don't really have a diagnosis. And respectfully, tell them to go themselves, because if only they did research, if only people were more aware. I got really angry when my brother told me that someone I know like said that I may not have, or that I don't have autism, and I got really angry because it's like, girl, you do not even fucking know me. A lot of people are gonna feel entitled on whether they have a right to say that you're autistic or not. Don't listen to them. You know yourself better than anyone else. You wouldn't be saying you're autistic if you didn't do any research and if you didn't take the necessary assessments that you need to take. And pursuing an autism diagnosis is very impossible for a lot of people. You know, I've heard that it takes up to 2 years to get a full diagnosis, and it takes over definitely 1K. That's how much it is. And a lot of us Latinos, since most of us are in lower resource communities, we don't have access to the healthcare that we need when it comes to autism. And for some reason, medical professionals, or not medical professionals, but the healthcare for autism is targeted towards kids, which is really stupid, because what do you think those kids are growing up to be? Like, do you think they just automatically not become autistic? It's really, really frustrating. But yeah, don't worry about getting yourself diagnosed. There's a lot of assessments you can take. I have links to 3 different ones, I think. And I also have links to a YouTube channel that I really related to called The Thought Spots, the one that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, you can take these tests, and if you pass the benchmark, I mean, hey. And I do want to add, a lot of these tests are directed towards white people or white men, because a lot of research on autism was done on white men. So if you even meet the benchmark of these tests, there might be a chance that your score is actually higher. These tests are just very skewed and don't take into account our cultural aspects. Oh, and then I also wanted to mention something that I found really helped me, you know, be a little happier and, you know, improve a lot of my trauma and just a lot of things that I deal with. I started talking to my dog like if he was my child. It's weird, I know, but I started talking to my child, he's my child. But I think a really good way for a lot of us to heal is treating our dog like how we should have been treated. Don't yell at your dog. Don't hit your dog. It's not okay. Take into account the way that you treat your pet. Like, you might improve a lot about your life, and you might even experience a little happiness if you treated your pet the way that you should have been treated. So learn how to understand your pet. There's a lot of nonverbals, obviously, because your pet can't talk. There's a lot of nonverbal behaviors that they do where they try to show you something, and if you start paying more attention to them, you might get to know them a lot better, and you can form this relationship with them that kind of helps you heal from a lot of trauma that we've experienced. And I think that's all I have. I don't know how long this video is going to be. I don't know how much of it I'm going to edit out. But I just want to wish everyone that's watching this video, like, best of luck. I hope this is a really good resource for you to lean on for figuring yourself out, whether you might be autistic or maybe you might be traumatized, who knows. I will say though, a lot of the traits that I listed are more specific to females with autism, so there might be some men that relate to a lot of the feelings attached to this, but they might not relate to a lot of the traits. I suggest you look up a lot of the male traits because they are different, and have a little more compassion for yourselves. It's not, don't talk to yourselves the way that you guys always do. You don't need to always call yourselves lazy. You don't even always need to call yourself stupid. I used to always say I'm stupid. I would always do something dumb in front of my boyfriend and be like, oh my god, I'm so stupid. And I don't do that anymore because I'm not stupid. I'm just autistic, and I think differently, and I process things differently, and it affects every part about my life. If anybody, like, I noticed I've been saying, oh, it's because of my autism, but it really is because of my autism. It's a part of me. It's why I am the way I am. It's why I react to things the way that I react to things. I literally can't change who I am. So if I'm talking about it too much, I'm sorry, but it really is a part of who I am. So be a little bit more compassionate to yourselves and share this with someone. Don't be diagnosing your friends because they might get really offended. but share this with whoever you think may need it. I really hope this helps, because there was nothing on YouTube when I was looking for it, and I know culture is a really big aspect to a lot of mental illnesses or mental disabilities, and it's overlooked with autism all the time. And one more thing, I'm just gonna say, there's gonna be a period of time where you're gonna be in a complete mind fuck, where you're gonna be like, wow, I was so neglected, wow, I deserved so much better, wow, I can't believe that I was, you know, this whole time and my parents never even saw the signs. It's completely normal and acceptable for you to think that way. I thought that exact same way. I literally was depressed for a whole 2 weeks because I was just literally processing all the times that my parents neglected me, when in reality I just had needs from, you know, different from other people. But I do want to say, have a little bit of compassion for your parents. You know, it's not their fault that they didn't really know what autism was. It is their fault they hit you, because like, as a parent, how could you hit your kid, bruh? I don't know how I would feel like hitting my child. But about the emotional abuse, like, have a little bit of compassion with the emotional abuse that they caused you, because it is really easy to blame your parent or to go and antagonize your parent, but it's probably just because that's how they were treated as kids, and they just took those patterns and repeated them with you, and they didn't know it was a bad thing. So just be a little bit compassionate to your parents. Maybe have a little conversation with your parents. Talk with your parents about how you acted when you were a kid. Talk to them, ask them if they have any interesting stories about how you acted as a kid. That might help you learn a lot about whether you're autistic or not. I'm gonna leave all of my socials in the description. I don't normally do commentary videos. This is literally the only video that I've done, but I consume commentary videos all the time, and I always have like all of these questions and things with like how society is. So I wouldn't mind making these videos. If anybody likes them, I wouldn't mind it at all. But I do stream on Twitch. My main thing is I'm a Twitch streamer. I stream on Twitch. I play games. Right now I don't have a PC, so it's like I'm very limited with the things that I want to do with my Twitch channel. But I have a pretty big male audience at the moment, but I kind of want to level it out, because I'm also very feminine, and I like to do my makeup, and I like to sew, and I like to design stuff and crochet. So I want more of a female audience for that. If you guys can please follow my Twitch, I would really appreciate it. And I think that's it. Bye.